On Sunday at about 3:20 in the afternoon, Nipsey with two other males were standing in front of his store, as has been reported. That Mr. Holder walked up on multiple occasions and engaged in a conversation with Nipsey and the others that were there. He left and then came back and subsequently came back armed with a handgun and purposely and repeatedly fired, striking and killing Nipsey Hussle, as well as striking and injuring the other two, one requiring them to be hospitalized or transported to a nearby hospital, the other suffering a wound but was treated at scene. Mr. Holder, we have identified him through, at this point, the available video evidence, statements, and information that we're getting from our community. And I cannot thank enough that the community is the one who is helping us solve this case. As in every case, it is a community's engagement that makes our lives safer, that provides justice for these victims and their families. Mr. Holder entered the passenger side of a 2016 Chevy Cruze. It's a white four-door vehicle. Its license plate is 7 Robert John David, that's RJD 742. And the vehicle was driven by an unidentified woman. That vehicle was located in the alley adjacent to that mini mall strip center where it fled from the scene. We have, as the mayor indicated, we continue to seek the public's help and assistance twofold. People that were at that scene or have information from people who were at that scene that can help identify further and provide us evidence of the persons responsible for this senseless murder. We ask that you call our South Bureau homicide detectives day or night. You also can use WeTip and Crime Stoppers and report anonymously. We're not done in gathering evidence on this horrific shooting. Secondarily, is we want the public to help us identify and apprehend Mr. Holder. Armed with a handgun, this senseless murder, this expression of violence represents that this is a man who is of a substantial risk to public safety and willing to use violence. And we want to see that stop. And we need the public's help in identifying him, and to Mr. Holder, who I am confident is watching this and is listening to these media accounts as this is spread not only around this region, but around this world. I ask him to surrender, to find a local law enforcement agency, to go to a station and surrender, and to defend himself as he feels appropriate, but to stop this mess, to stop this from continuing. Let me comment just briefly in regards to the context of this increase in violence. So January and February of this year, this city averaged approximately 13 shooting victims a week. And that number, while it may sound high, is actually for Los Angeles Police Department and the Los City of Angels, it was at and below last year's numbers and the year before, substantially. March, we saw that number double to 26 on average. And nearly entirely that increase was in 77th area of the South Los Angeles. 77th in January and February experienced just under 5 shootings a week. That number expanded to nearly 15 on average a week in the month of March. Much of it is gang. In fact, nearly all of it is gang related. Nipsey Hussle's death and his tragic shooting, I have no information today that has that involved in this other shooting violence, and that needs to be stressed. What we're seeing here is not just a shooting of a hip-hop artist, a profound individual coming back to give back to his community. What I'm concerned about as chief, and I know our community leaders are as well, is we've got to continue to go at this recent increase in shooting violence because it's not just a dispute over a personal matter. This is gang violence that we're seeing, particularly in South Los Angeles, but also on the west side and in other parts of the city, that we need to redouble our efforts and keep working towards intervening and finding ways of resolving disputes without people resulting to a bullet with no name on it. So with that, the group, we're here to answer questions and concerns. And I remind, as the mayor had indicated, that as we focus a lot of effort and energy in my remarks today and our remarks, that this still remains one of the safest times in Los Angeles. But we don't reach that safety by apathy or minimizing what we have in front of us. Each of these lives matter, and our commitment as a department, our elected officials, who I'm proud of their work and investment, our community and faith leaders, is that we're relentless, and we will not give up in seeing that our communities are safe. Thank you.
Can you give us a better idea about the motive?
At this point,
Go ahead. Also, I know there's Spanish media here. When we start questions and answers, but I'll say a statement in Spanish at the end for our Spanish media. Go ahead.
so at this point, our investigation, based on witness statements and the background of those that we've identified, we believe this to be a dispute between Mr. Hussle and Mr. Holder. I'm not going to go into the conversations, but it appears to be a personal matter between the two of them in regards to a dispute, and I'll leave it at that. I'm going to ask you to understand that we have identified Mr. Holder because based on yesterday, what we've learned in the first 24 hours, we believe him to be the responsible individual for this killing. And we have a responsibility as law enforcement to work and ensure that the public's made aware of that, as well as our officers and other law enforcement who may come across this individual who is armed with a handgun and willing to use such violence. We're working closely with the district attorney's office, and I do not wish to prejudice this case or undermine its success by going into too much detail relative to the facts and circumstances.